Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Rachel from Low Profile.
And we're going to be talking about Would You Like This Badge?
So we made Would You Like This Badge in 2011, and it's a set of limited edition badge works that we made about our responses really to living in Plymouth as artists, which we'd been doing since 2005. And these badges were available to the public to buy from our 5 favourite pubs in the city.
Each badge had a text work on it or a slogan. So we spent a really, really long time honing what those texts should be, because I think that for us it was really important that the tone of them was right. Like, we really wanted somebody that lived in the city to feel comfortable wearing them, and kind of owning that statement, but also for people outside the city to kind of find them intriguing and to kind of want to know more, or to also want to buy that badge that had that text on. So I can remember spending a really long time working out what they should say. And I think that was the process of us just kind of collecting phrases. And sometimes those were phrases that we'd overheard people saying. Sometimes they were things that we were aware of, but we wanted each text to be factually correct. And so that was kind of like a kind of guiding principle. We're often thinking about the way that our work meets an audience and embedding that in a kind of everyday life. And so that space of the bar and then responding to that kind of opportunity was really exciting to us. And kind of placing artwork there at the same value as a packet of crisps and a packet of nuts or whatever. And so kind of selling them for this affordable price and people encountering them in the same way.
And that it was like a really easy transaction as well, because we were splitting all the profits with the landlords. So it was very simple. It used the same like method that buying a card of peanuts from the wholesaler would have. We made 6 different badges that each had slogans on them. We had Plymouth, the spirit of disco. We had Plymouth, twinned with Plymouth. There was Plymouth, not Portsmouth. Plymouth, 3 hours, 43 minutes from the capital.
Plymouth, bigger than Reykjavik. That was one. And what have we missed? Oh, move to Plymouth, of course. Our ongoing attempt to get people to move to the city.
And you could buy these badges, as we said, from our 5 favourite pubs. Inside the little package was a badge and also a map and some information about the project. So you could use this map in a little way like Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all feeling, where you could go round to the different pubs and then buy each of the different badges. But the final badge, the 6th badge, the Spirit of Disco one, you could only get by signing up to take part in a pub crawl. So that was very limited edition, and there was information about how to sign up for the pub crawl in the package as well.
I think that we were thinking about the idea of what it means to be local somewhere, and we're not from Plymouth. We're both kind of had moved here from different places, and we really liked the idea of like being a local in a pub, which neither of us were. And so we sort of set ourselves the challenge of to become local, to kind of become part of a community, and recognising what that means to walk into somewhere and to feel at home there. And also knowing that when people visit a city, often they won't find the better places. They won't find those kind of interesting, quirky or independent places, because you tend to stick to kind of like the main, like town or the main kind of areas, and you maybe miss that stuff. And so we really kind of wanted to use that local knowledge to kind of guide the experiences of people that were coming into the city, and to give them a more personal experience based on our own local knowledge. And so we approached what at that point were like we decided were our 5 favourite pubs, and spoke to the landlords and the people that worked there and told them about this idea to make that we were going to make these badges and that they were going to be displayed on peanut cards that would then be hung behind the bar in the same way that they had their scampi fries or their nuts or whatever. And quite quickly got them on board, I think. They were kind of intrigued and enthusiastic, and I think we thought it would be a harder sell than it was, but they were all really kind of up for it, and yeah, that was really nice.
Yeah, I remember as well that we were quite excited about this space behind the bar and thinking about this place that is used to display stuff and that is used to it's used as a merchandising space, but in a really gentle way. It's not pushy, it's just there. If you want it, you can have it. And I think we were quite intrigued about what would happen if you started to slide artworks into this space. And probably as well, I think it's fair to say, the pub landlords that we were talking to probably weren't involved in different contemporary art projects before. It probably wasn't something that was 100% on their radar. So that was also quite a nice secret challenge maybe as well, to bring our work into those spaces. So we were making this project in the run-up to the British Art Show, which happened in Plymouth in 2011. And we were thinking about ways that we could make and show work for people who were visiting the city, but also residents of the city and people who are here long term, like we are.
So we got together with a group of other artists, friends of ours, and made this project called Come to Ours, which was a series of artist-led, I suppose, kind of interventions into the city. We made use of unused and unoccupied spaces or underused spaces in a kind of resourceful way, and then ran that alongside the British Art Show for the 3 months that the big show, the big touring show, was in the city. And so I think there was a kind of element of responding to that kind of the lack of other spaces, but also doing that in a kind of really resourceful way.
We were also thinking about some of those ideas of how you make people feel welcome, or how you might share local knowledge about a place. I think at the time, Plymouth was also starting to be rebranded. I remember there being this Positive Plymouth campaign. And we were thinking about slogans. People would often ask us why we had made this call to live in Plymouth as artists and what that was all about. A lot of the time, people wouldn't even know where Plymouth was.
Yeah, and some people were quite rude, weren't they, about that choice? I mean, I think a lot has changed since 2011, but at that point, the cultural scene was still very much developing, and the British Art Show being in city was a really big deal because of that. And so leading up to that point, I think, people were a bit confused about our active choice to come and live in the city, and I think we really wanted to respond to that as well, and to make work that was really positive about the city and about our experiences, but really talked about, I suppose, drew attention to those different things around like you say, the branding of a city and how a city does that, the kind of outside perception of a city that people that don't live in that place have, for whatever reason, aligned with our own experiences. I think we were thinking a lot about how people were going to encounter the work, and that there would definitely be some people that would find out about it because they knew about this overarching project Come to Ours that we were making, and they were kind of actively seeking out kind of the projects that were happening alongside the British Art Show happening in the city. And so we were aware that there was that audience, but also I think, that kind of incidental audience, the people that would just come across it in the pub and encounter it because it was just there whilst they were buying their drink, was really interesting to us. And I suppose we talk a lot about where the frame of art sits around our projects and when that's important, when it's less important, and at what point you find out it's an artwork, or if you do or not, whether or not that's ever really important at all. And so there's this kind of possibility of you just experience it for what it is, as a badge. You're intrigued by it, you ask about it, the landlord tells you it's £1 and you think, oh yeah, well that's all right, I'll get one of those. And then later you pull out the little map and the handout and you find out more and you realise that it's made by some artists and it's part of this thing. And perhaps that kind of piques your curiosity, and then maybe you go to the other pubs and collect some more, or you have a conversation with somebody about it. And I think like the kind of, we've made, maybe that was the first wearable work we made, do you think? But I think that since then we've gone on to make lots of badges and different items that can be worn. And I think we're really interested again, like, so there's this encounter of the pub and the bar and finding the work there, but also it has this possibility to then move and travel by the people that decide to buy it and to wear it, or to give it to somebody and for them to wear it. And we know from wearing the badges ourselves that that happens quite a lot, like when you're in a pub or in a shop maybe, or on a bus, and somebody kind of sees you wearing it and asks like, what's that about? And so the idea of it sparking a kind of conversation around where that thing came from, or why you have it, or what that means, or what that statement says, or maybe you talk about Plymouth for a while, or, you know, I think that the idea of it travelling and the art kind of stories of the work being retold by the people that are kind of then wearing it, was really exciting to us. Like, I had experiences like where I crossed the road and saw somebody that I didn't know wearing one, and it was like totally thrilling to see like the work out in the world. And you know, we got told by one of the landlords of the pubs that their darts team had bought an entire peanut card of the badges. I can't remember which one now, but they decided that could be their team's badge, and so they just bought them all. And the idea that they were then like moving around playing darts wherever, like kind of proudly wearing their badge, was really lovely and really special. And they were really popular, weren't they? Like, I think we sold 300 like in the first couple of weeks, and we had to restock them. And I would often get a phone call from like, I don't know, like Steve at the Fort, who would just be like, I need some more, and then would be asking if he could have a different badge this time. And so it sort of took on its own life, that, you know, way past us and our control of the project.
And that sense of it, like the taking on its own life, becoming quite an important piece of the work, that was something that is recognised by the team at the museum, who decided that they would like to buy a set of the badges as part of the permanent archive for the city. And we were very excited about that. We had never really kind of planned this to be an artwork that might end up in a museum collection. But then seeing that it had obviously marked a moment of time, and had been important, and something that those curators felt would resonate with people in Plymouth, you know, for 100 years or something, that was also a really exciting proposition.
Yeah, especially because the project was done, you know, that artwork was made with very little resource. I mean, we did get funding from the Arts Council for the Come To Us project, which was great, but it wasn't made with loads of money. And the badges were like, yeah, this kind of low-fi, being sold for £1 kind of, you know, low value thing. So for it suddenly to become this sort of set of precious items was really amazing.
So this pub crawl that we made was taking, I think, about 30 people around to the 5 different pubs that were participating in the project. So we met them outside the Fortescue, I think was the pub that we started with, and gave a full briefing about how to act in a pub, which we had found. So we were using a lot of found text through the pub crawl. And we had found this in a guide, I think it was a guide for foreign students coming to the UK, which was talking about all of the small details in like pub etiquette. So about how to queue at the bar, about whether you should raise your glass, your empty glass at the bar, or whether that was rude. There were things about how rounds work, how round system work. And we were kind of interested, in finding all of this stuff that as soon as you start to work to talk about it as like a set of procedures, it just becomes completely absurd when you think about it in that way.
Yeah, and we sort of moved the group, I think it was about 30 people, kind of from pub to pub, and those sorts of in-between parts of travelling from one pub to another, often we would do some sort of kind of performative action or say something or kind of animate something. So I can remember that we were stood outside the Seymour and we played the very opening introduction of the Road to Nowhere, the song Road to Nowhere, before we then took them to the Nowhere pub. And when we were outside the Bee Bar, we kind of waved out to sea, and we were kind of like waving to all the different Plymouths across the land. And we also kind of read this sort of like rousing text, which was actually taken from the film Cool Runnings, I can remember, or partly taken from that film, around the idea of underdogs, really, I think. And I think we were sort of recognising that to us, Plymouth was a bit of an underdog city in that people really underestimated it. And we were sort of responding again to some of that sort of slightly confused responses that we'd had to why we were there in the first place. And we really wanted to kind of make a statement about like, yeah, we're here for the long run. And so there was this lovely moment of people coming together to do that. And then, finally, outside the Nowhere, we were raising a glass to all those other Plymouths. So I think there's 50, was there
50 or 51
in total, yeah.
I think we found out lots of things to do with resourcefulness and how to draw resources in that we didn't know we necessarily had access to. So part of that was through working as part of this group of artists to make Come to Ours. And part of it was about looking out for spaces where we could make things happen and just going for that and doing that. And thinking about how sometimes you can feel quite put off about having to ask for permission to do things, or feel like somebody else has to grant you that access as an artist, whereas we just went in and had a conversation.
You know, that thing of like when art is sanctioned or not, and realising that actually we could just make stuff happen ourselves in quite a relatively straightforward way, just by kind of, bringing people into the project and asking, just for a very simple kind of setup and, for them to be involved and for that kind of exchange to be quite straightforward, meant that we suddenly had our work in 5 venues, essentially, across the city.
And a museum collection.
Yeah.
I think it also helped us think about and like reframe where our art was meeting an audience. So the types of strategies we would make to bring our work into people's everyday lives.
Yeah, and I think that even recently we've been talking about how great that peanut card was and that kind of method of placing work behind a bar, and thinking about the potential of using that again. So, I think we might, 10 years, 11 years later, come back to that approach and think about how we could, how we might use that again.